On a cold, snowy night, Alex found two German shepherds, injured and barely hanging on, as if they were beyond saving. But the bond between them grew into a strong friendship. When faced with the inevitable goodbye, would Alex have the courage to let them go for their future? This story will make you reflect on love, loyalty, and the tough decisions we have to make in life. It was a cold winter night in Colorado. The wind howled through the cracks in the wooden cabin window. Alex Hill sat by the fire, a warm cup of tea in his hands, his eyes distant as they followed the dancing flames. It had been so long since he'd felt this kind of peace. The mountains were silent, with nothing but the sound of the wind and the soft snowfall gently resting on the branches around him. Alex had been living alone in this cabin, far from the bustling world outside. The memories of war still haunted him, but tonight, in the chill of the winter air, he hoped to find some calm. His solitude had slowly become his only companion. But tonight, everything was about to change. As Alex got up to add more logs to the fire, a strange noise came from outside, soft yet distinct. His ears immediately perked up, and he squinted through the frosty glass of the window. He could hear the quiet crunch of footsteps in the thick snow, but it wasn't the kind of sound he'd expect from the animals he usually saw. He moved quietly toward the window, his heart thumping in his chest. The night was still, only the strange noise growing louder with each step. Then he saw them, two shadowy figures, flickering beneath the faint moonlight. Their breath came out in clouds, their large, sturdy bodies swaying but unsteady as they moved. They looked like ghosts, appearing and disappearing in the dark. One of them stood firm, while the other staggered closer to the cabin door, its eyes glowing bright in the night. It stared straight at Alex. They weren't aggressive, weren't threatening, but the sudden appearance of these creatures in the dead of night left Alex feeling a chill that went beyond the cold. He didn't know what they were, but he saw their eyes filled with determination and resilience, like the gaze of a wild wolf. Panic began to creep into his mind. Wolves, could they really be wolves? He thought to himself. With his wartime instincts kicking in, anything unusual could be a threat. His heart raced, his mind spun, and his hand instinctively reached for the tranquilizer gun he kept nearby. Without a second thought, he swung open the window, aimed at the larger of the two, and fired. A puff of white smoke shot out from the dart, striking the big dog right in the chest. It collapsed immediately. The other dog turned, staggering, and began to retreat. Alex stood frozen, gasping for breath, his grip still tight on the gun. But soon, all was silent again. Not the roar of an angry wolf, not the growl of a beast, but an eerie, haunting silence. Alex approached the door, his curiosity gnawing at him. What had just happened? He stepped outside and found two German shepherds lying motionless in the snow. Not wolves, but dogs. Dogs in need, just like him. Lost, but with the will to survive. A wave of guilt surged inside him. They're not wolves, they're just dogs, Alex muttered to himself. He rushed over to check on them, his heart pounding. Relief washed over him when he realized they weren't too badly hurt. But the weight of his guilt couldn't be shaken. He'd hurt them. All because of a misunderstanding. Without wasting another second, Alex hurried to bring them inside. He set them down on the floor near the fire, his hands trembling. His whole body shook, but he couldn't let them lie out there in the freezing cold any longer. His mind was spinning, but the need to protect them overpowered everything else. He gently laid the first dog down. He could feel its shallow, uneven breaths, its chest rising and falling with struggle. The thick fur was caked with snow and blood. One of its legs barely moved, though it tried to breathe deeply. trying to fight through the pain. The other dog wasn't in any better shape. It lay still, its breaths faint and shallow, eyes wide open, staring up at the ceiling in confusion, full of uncertainty. Alex knelt beside it, his heart weighed down by guilt. In the dim light of the cabin, the fire flickered, casting long shadows that made the dogs seem even more fragile, more vulnerable. The weight of his remorse hung heavy in the air. A wave of guilt surged through Alex again. He cursed himself for acting out of panic, for firing the tranquilizer gun in haste. He hadn't known they were German shepherds, loyal creatures that could have been part of a family, just dogs looking for help in a moment of desperate need. His guilt spread through him like a thick fog as he looked at them, his eyes filled with regret, unable to believe he'd done this. "Damn it, what did I do?" Alex muttered under his breath, his hands shaking as he grabbed a cloth to wipe away the blood from their fur. Time seemed to stop as he realized that in this dark cabin, he was completely alone. No one to help, no one to comfort him. These animals, just like him, had been hurt by life. They were lonely and needed healing. He carefully draped a blanket over them, bringing them closer to the fire. He could feel their breathing become a bit more regular, but the worry didn't fade. Would they wake up? Could they forgive him? Those questions kept turning over and over in his mind, and he felt like a criminal, trapped in his own guilt. He sat down, his head resting on his knees, staring at the two dogs by the firelight. The injuries on their bodies were nothing compared to the pain in his heart. Part of him wanted to help them, but there was still a part of him questioning what he'd done. The guilt and fear gripped him, leaving him frozen in place, unable to move. Slowly, the cold wind blew through the cracks in the door, the chill in the air deepening the loneliness inside Alex's chest. But he knew he couldn't abandon them. Despite his weary body, despite the exhaustion creeping into his bones, he couldn't just sit by and do nothing. He had to do something. He had to fix this. He couldn't let these animals become victims of his own panic. A little while later, as the weight of guilt eased just slightly, Alex tried to lift his spirits. He told himself he could do this. He looked at the two dogs, feeling the warmth slowly spreading throughout the room. They hadn't woken up yet, but as he gazed into their eyes, Alex felt something stir in him. A hope, a sense of guilt washed over him, deep and overwhelming. "They're not wolves. They're just dogs," Alex mumbled to himself. He rushed to their side, checking their condition. Relief flooded him when he saw they weren't seriously injured, but the weight of his guilt pressed harder. He had hurt them because of a simple misunderstanding. Alex quickly brought them inside, placing them on the floor near the fire. His body trembled, his mind in chaos, but he couldn't leave them out in the freezing cold any longer. His hands shook as he carefully moved them, but his instincts were clear. He had to help. He had to make things right. He gently placed the first dog down. It was breathing weakly, its chest rising and falling unevenly. Its thick coat was covered in snow and blood, and one of its legs barely moved despite its attempts to regain its breath. The other dog was no better. It lay motionless, breathing shallowly, eyes wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling, full of confusion and doubt. Alex knelt beside it, a heavy weight of guilt sitting in his chest. The firelight flickered weakly, casting long shadows, and in that dimness, the dogs looked so vulnerable, so fragile. Another wave of guilt hit him hard. He cursed himself for acting out of panic, for firing the tranquilizer gun in haste. He hadn't known they were German shepherds, loyal creatures that could have been part of a family, just animals in search of help in their moment of need. The guilt settled deeper as he looked at them, his heart heavy with regret. "Damn it, what have I done?" Alex whispered, his hands trembling as he reached for a cloth to wipe away the blood. Time seemed to slow down. In this dark, quiet cabin, he was alone. No one to help, no one to comfort him. These animals, like him, had been wounded by life. They were alone, just like him, and they needed healing. He gently covered them with a blanket and brought them closer to the fire. He could feel their breathing slow, becoming more regular, but the worry didn't leave him. Would they wake up? Would they forgive him? The questions circled endlessly in his mind, deepening the ache in his chest. Alex sat down, resting his head against the wall, staring at the two dogs in the warm glow of the fire. His thoughts were a tangle of guilt and fear, the haunting memories of war and the loneliness of having no one by his side creeping back in. But this time, something was different. The panic inside him wasn't the only thing left in the room. There was also a quiet understanding, a growing empathy. These dogs weren't wolves. They weren't here to hurt him. They were here to seek help. And he, Alex, had been the one to take their life away, even if it was accidental. Seconds ticked by in the heavy silence, the crackling of the fire echoing in the room. Alex asked himself again, could I really fix this? Could they feel the regret in me? Could they forgive me? The questions didn't have answers, only a restless unease that filled his heart. He remembered the panic in their eyes when they woke up after the tranquilizer hit. Their eyes didn't show hatred, only confusion, fear. That wasn't the look of wild wolves. It was the look of animals hurt, seeking rescue. Alex couldn't forget their gentleness, the way they looked at him when he brought them into the cabin. The weight of guilt grew heavier inside him. What have I done? The internal struggle was becoming clearer now. Alex couldn't deny the connection he felt with them, something he'd never felt with anyone before. But the fear still pressed on him. Fear that they would turn on him. Fear that he wouldn't be able to control himself. The thought of facing the truth about himself was too much to bear, and he didn't know what to do next. He had saved them, but he couldn't save himself from the guilt and confusion. How could I love them when I feel so undeserving? How can I care for them when I'm still struggling with my own pain? The answer seemed impossible to find. But in that moment, staring at the two dogs lying peacefully by the fire, Alex realized he couldn't walk away from them. He had to do something, not just to save them, but to save himself. Alex stood up and walked over to the dogs, gently placing his hand on their heads, softly patting them. Despite his lingering fear, despite the doubts in his heart, he knew he had to face those fears. If he could save them, if he could do something right for them, maybe he could save himself too. Deep down, he understood that no, he couldn't erase the past, but at least, just for now, he could do something right. And that would be enough. A wave of guilt surged inside Alex. They're not wolves, they're just dogs, he muttered under his breath. He rushed to their side, checking their condition. The relief when he realized they weren't seriously injured was short-lived. The anxiety and guilt still gnawed at him. He had hurt them because of a misunderstanding. Alex quickly carried them inside, placing them on the floor near the fire. His body felt like it was shaking uncontrollably. His mind was a mess, but he couldn't leave them outside in the cold any longer. The trembling in his hands was almost involuntary, but he had to act. He had to make things right. He gently placed the first dog on the floor, watching its weak breath rise and fall unevenly. Its thick coat was matted with snow and blood, and one leg seemed nearly immobile, though it tried to regain its breath. The other dog wasn't any better. It lay still, barely breathing, its eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling in confusion and doubt. Alex knelt beside it, his heart heavy with guilt. In the dim light of the cabin, Only the weak glow from the fire made the shadows dance across the room, emphasizing the weight of his regret. Then, the guilt hit him again, harder this time. He cursed himself for panicking, for rushing to tranquilize them. He hadn't known they were German shepherds, loyal creatures who might have been part of a family, just animals looking for help in their time of need. The guilt spread like a thick fog as he looked at them, regret in his eyes, unable to believe he could have done something like that. "Damn it! What did I do?" Alex whispered, his voice shaky as he grabbed a towel and gently wiped away the blood from their fur. Time seemed to stop as he realized that in this dark cabin, he was all alone. No one to help, no one to comfort him. These animals, just like him, had been wounded by life, just as alone as he had been, needing healing. He carefully draped a blanket over them, trying to warm them by bringing them closer to the fire. He could feel their breathing growing steadier, but the worry still lingered. Would they wake up? Could they forgive him? The questions spun in his head, making him feel like a criminal. He sat down, resting his head on his knees, watching the two dogs in the soft light of the fire. Their wounds were nothing compared to the pain in his heart. Part of him wanted to help them, but there was still doubt inside him about what he had done. The guilt and fear weighed him down, leaving him unable to move, unable to do anything but wait. Gradually, the cold wind blew through the cracks in the door, and the chill in the room seemed to deepen the loneliness in Alex's chest. But he knew he couldn't leave these dogs. His tired body, aching from exhaustion, couldn't stop him. He had to do something. He had to save them, fix what he had broken. No matter what, these two animals couldn't be the next victims of his panic. A while later, as the guilt began to ease just a little, Alex tried to encourage himself. He told himself he could do this. He looked at the two dogs in silence, feeling the warmth spread in the room. They hadn't woken up yet, but when he looked into their eyes, he felt something. A deep feeling of guilt stirred inside Alex. "They're not wolves, they're just dogs," he murmured to himself. He rushed over to check on them, his heart heavy. Relief flooded him when he saw they weren't seriously injured, but the guilt and anxiety still lingered. He had hurt them, all because of a misunderstanding. Alex hurriedly brought them inside, gently laying them near the fire. His hands shook, his body trembling from the effort. His mind was in chaos, but he couldn't leave them out in the cold any longer. Every movement felt out of his control, but he knew he had to do something. He set the first dog on the floor, noticing its weak, uneven breaths, its chest rising and falling slowly. The thick fur was matted with snow and blood. One of its legs was nearly immobile, but it still tried to breathe deeply, as if fighting through the pain. The other dog was in no better shape. It lay motionless, its breaths faint, its eyes wide open, staring up at the ceiling with confusion and fear. Alex knelt beside it, guilt weighing heavily on his chest. The firelight flickered, casting shadows that made the dogs seem even more fragile, more vulnerable. The regret inside him deepened. Another wave of guilt crashed over Alex. He blamed himself for panicking and firing the tranquilizer so hastily. He hadn't known they were German shepherds, loyal creatures, maybe even family, just looking for help in their time of need. The guilt spread, heavier with every passing second. He looked at them, his eyes filled with regret, unable to believe he had done this. "Damn it, what did I do?" Alex whispered, unable to contain his emotions. He stood, his hands shaking as he grabbed a cloth to wipe away the blood. Time seemed to freeze as he realized he was completely alone in the dark cabin, with no one to help, no one to comfort him. These animals, just like him, had been hurt by life. They were alone, needing healing, just as he did. He carefully covered them with a blanket, moving them closer to the fire to warm them. He could feel their breathing becoming more regular, but the worry didn't leave him. Would they wake up? Could they forgive him? These questions swirled in his mind, making him feel like a criminal. He sat down, resting his head on his knees, staring at the two dogs by the fire. Their wounds were nothing compared to the pain in his heart. Part of him wanted to help them, but there was still doubt inside him about what he had done. The guilt and fear paralyzed him, leaving him unable to do anything but sit and wait. As the cold wind blew through the cracks in the door, the chill in the room seemed to deepen the loneliness in Alex's chest. But he knew he couldn't leave them. His exhausted body, struggling against fatigue, couldn't stop him. He had to do something. He had to save them, fix the mistake he had made. No matter what, these animals couldn't become the next victims of his panic. A little while later, as the guilt began to ease just slightly, Alex tried to lift his spirits. He told himself he could do this. He looked at the two dogs in the quiet room, feeling the warmth of the fire slowly spreading throughout the cabin. They hadn't woken up yet, but as he gazed into their eyes, he felt something. In that moment, Alex realized something profound. Despite everything, he couldn't leave them. He had to do something, not just to save them, but to save himself too. He stood up, walked over to the dogs, and gently placed his hand on their heads. He patted them softly, as though trying to convey all the emotions he couldn't put into words. Despite his lingering fear, despite the doubts in his heart, Alex knew he had to overcome them. If he could save them, if he could do something right for them, maybe, just maybe, he could save himself. Deep down, he understood that even though his actions couldn't erase the past, at least just for now, he could do something right. And that was all that mattered. A strange feeling began to stir inside Alex. It was determination. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could decide what came next. Right now, these two dogs were his comfort, his only friends, and though they might not stay forever, at least he would do everything he could to help them, so no one else had to feel as alone as he once did. There's nothing to be afraid of anymore, Alex whispered to himself, trying to calm his racing thoughts. The weight in his chest began to lift as he looked at the two dogs, lying peacefully beside the fire, their breathing steady. Everything seemed to settle into place, but the feeling of being lost still clung to him. In the days that had passed, he had poured his heart into caring for Hunter and Thor. But now, his inner conflict began to grow. On one hand, he felt like they were part of his family. On the other, he knew they couldn't stay with him in this isolated cabin forever. Their wounds were healing, but the wounds inside Alex seemed to go even deeper. He began to realize that he was depending on them more than they were depending on him. These dogs weren't just companions in his healing. They were the ones who made him feel less alone. Every morning, when he woke up, that emptiness wasn't there anymore. Every time he looked into Hunter and Thor's eyes, he felt a moment of comfort, however brief. But deep down, he knew their presence couldn't last forever. One day, they would have to leave. A part of him felt that he had kept them in his life for too long. It was a silent commitment, one he had unknowingly placed on both himself and them. Alex vaguely understood that if he didn't let them go, if he kept holding on, he would only be trapping them in a world they didn't truly belong to. But this thought hurt, deep, like a wound he hadn't faced since the war had taken everything he loved. "They'll have to go," Alex murmured to himself. But those words were full of contradiction. He could let them go, but he couldn't bear the loneliness when they left. That feeling was too familiar, too painful. But Alex also began to realize that the bond between him and Hunter and Thor had surpassed what he'd ever thought of as a rescue dog's role. They weren't just tools or work companions, they were loyal friends, the kind Alex never thought he would have. In his heart, they had become family. But that bond made everything more complicated. Could Alex really continue living alone without them by his side? Could he send them back to a life as K9s, like Emma Thornton suggested? They would have a fuller life, but would that life make them happier? Or would it just swap a life of freedom for one bound to duty? Alex continued sifting through the broken pieces of his decision, trying to make sense of it all. From the first day he brought them in, he hadn't stopped thinking about this moment. He didn't want to be the one to let them go. But a part of him knew that keeping them forever would only be selfishness. If love was truly about giving, then he had to let them go free, just like a dog should live. It was determination. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could decide what to do next. Right now, these two dogs were his only comfort, his only companions. And even though they might not stay forever, he would do everything he could to help them, so no one else would have to feel as alone as he once did. "There's nothing to fear anymore," Alex whispered to himself, trying to calm his racing thoughts. The weight in his chest gradually began to lift as he looked at the two dogs, lying peacefully beside the fire, their breathing steady. Everything seemed to settle, but the feeling of being lost still clung to him. Over the past few days, he had poured his heart into caring for Hunter and Thor. But now, his inner conflict began to rise. On one hand, he felt like they were part of his family. On the other, he knew they couldn't stay with him in this lonely cabin forever. Their wounds were healing, but the wounds inside Alex seemed to grow deeper. He began to realize that he was depending on them more than they were depending on him. These dogs weren't just companions in his healing. They were the ones who filled the emptiness inside him. Every morning, when he woke up, the emptiness wasn't there anymore. Every time he looked into Hunter and Thor's eyes, he felt a fleeting moment of comfort. But deep down, he knew their presence couldn't last forever. One day, they would have to leave. Part of him felt that he had kept them in his life for too long. It was a silent commitment, one he had unknowingly placed on both himself and them. Alex vaguely understood that if he didn't let them go, if he kept holding on, he would only be trapping them in a world they didn't truly belong to. But this thought hurt him, deep, like a wound he hadn't faced since the war had taken everything he loved. "They'll have to go," Alex whispered to himself. But those words were tangled with a deep contradiction. He could let them go, but he couldn't bear the loneliness when they left. That feeling was too familiar, too painful. But Alex also began to realize that the bond between him and Hunter and Thor had surpassed what he'd ever thought of as a rescue dog's role. They weren't just tools or work companions. They were loyal friends, the kind Alex never thought he would have. In his heart, they had become family. But that connection made everything more complicated. Could Alex really continue living alone without them by his side? Could he send them back to their life as K9s, like Emma Thornton had suggested? They would have a fuller life. But would that life make them happier? Or would it just swap a life of freedom for one bound to duty? Alex continued to sift through the fragments of his decision, trying to make sense of it all. From the first day he brought them in, he hadn't stopped thinking about this moment. He didn't want to be the one to let them go. But a part of him knew that keeping them forever would only be selfishness. The question kept swirling in Alex's mind, creating an unrelenting storm in his thoughts. How can I hurt all of us? "But I can't let you go," Alex whispered, his eyes closing as if trying to hold back the tears. "I don't know how to let you go." That internal conflict was slowly wearing him down. His body and mind were exhausted from this ongoing battle. Every time he looked into Hunter and Thor's kind eyes, he couldn't think about them leaving. It felt like a goodbye he couldn't say, a wound that would never heal. The three of them had shared so many days together, but Alex knew that if he kept them, he wouldn't be able to give them the full life they deserved. Every morning, when he woke up and saw them lying next to him, their heads resting on his legs, Alex's heart felt heavy. He knew that these dogs had helped him get through the loneliest times of his life. But now, his love and care for them felt like a burden. If he kept them here, would they truly be happy? Could they reach their full potential living in a cabin, isolated in the quiet mountains? Alex took a deep breath, trying to push those thoughts from his mind. He looked into Thor's steadfast eyes and Hunter's eyes full of loyalty. These dogs weren't just companions, they were part of his life. But if he kept them, was he being selfish? Every night, Alex couldn't sleep soundly. It felt like there was a heavy stone pressing on his chest. He kept asking himself, am I holding on to them for myself? Because of the loneliness I don't want to face again? They needed freedom. They needed to return to their canine missions, to places where they could fully use their skills, where they could help people like they had in the past. Every time he looked at the wound on Thor's body, guilt surged inside him. He had promised himself he wouldn't let them suffer any more pain. But now, he realized that keeping them with him, even if it brought comfort to him, wasn't what was best for them. You deserve to live free. Do what you were born to do. Alex whispered, his eyes lost in Hunter's bright, knowing gaze. He wanted to do the right thing, but the fear and the bond he shared with the two dogs made the decision so difficult. Alex stood up, walked over to the window, and looked outside. The snow was still falling, gently covering the branches of the trees, creating a peaceful, quiet scene. But inside him, the chaos didn't stop. The questions kept spinning in his head. How do I make the right choice? How can I let you go without feeling like I'm losing a piece of myself? He turned back to look at them again. Hunter and Thor, still lying there, eyes watching him as if they understood everything he was feeling. They weren't angry. They weren't holding grudges. Their love and loyalty were the only things that remained unchanged in Alex's unstable world. Each day, the conflict inside him grew clearer. He knew that even if he kept them, they wouldn't have a full life here. Just like him, they couldn't stay trapped in the past forever. A deep, unfamiliar feeling stirred inside Alex. It was determination. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could decide what came next. Right now, these two dogs were his comfort, his only companions. And even though they might not stay forever, he would do everything he could to help them, to make sure no one else had to feel as alone as he once did. There's nothing to be afraid of anymore, Alex whispered, trying to reassure himself. The weight in his chest slowly began to lift as he looked at the two dogs, lying peacefully beside the fire, their breathing steady. Everything seemed to be calming down, but the feeling of being lost still clung to him. Over the past few days, he had poured his heart into caring for Hunter and Thor, but now the internal conflict had started to surface. On one hand, he felt they were a part of his family. On the other, he knew they couldn't stay with him in this remote cabin forever. Their wounds were healing, but the wounds inside Alex were getting deeper. He began to realize he was depending on them more than they were on him. These dogs weren't just companions in his healing. They were the ones who filled the empty spaces in his life. Every morning, when he woke up, there was no longer that hollow feeling. Every time he looked into Hunter and Thor's eyes, he felt a moment of comfort, even if it was brief. But deep down, he knew their time with him couldn't last forever. One day they would have to leave. Part of him felt he had kept them in his life too long. It was a silent commitment, one he had unknowingly placed on both himself and them. Alex vaguely understood that if he didn't let them go, if he kept holding on, He would only trap them in a world they didn't truly belong to. But this thought cut deep, like a wound that hadn't healed, a pain Alex hadn't faced since the war took everything he loved. "They'll have to go," Alex whispered to himself. But those words were tangled with a deep contradiction. He could let them go, but the loneliness that would follow was unbearable. That feeling was too familiar, too painful. But Alex also realized that his bond with Hunter and Thor had gone beyond what he ever thought a rescue dog's role could be. They weren't just tools or companions in work. They were loyal friends, the kind Alex never thought he would have. In his heart, they had become family. But that bond made everything more complicated. Could Alex continue living alone without them by his side? Could he send them back to a life as K9s, like Emma Thornton suggested? They would have a fuller life. But would that life make them happier? Or would it just replace a life of freedom with one bound to duty? Alex continued sifting through the fragments of his decision, each thought sharper than the last. From the first day he brought them in, he hadn't stopped thinking about this moment. He didn't want to be the one to let them go. But a part of him understood that holding on would only be selfishness. If love was truly about giving, then he had to let them go free, just like a dog should live. One evening, after a long stretch of silence, Alex took Hunter and Thor outside when the snowstorm finally stopped. He walked through the thick snowdrifts, and the three of them wandered in the vast white world. In that moment, despite the freezing cold, Alex felt no longer alone. He could feel the warmth of his friends, who didn't speak, but understood exactly what he was going through. And in that moment, Alex realized, this journey wasn't just the recovery of two dogs, it was the healing of him too. "You've shown me that I can find my faith again," Alex thought quietly as he gazed into Hunter and Thor's eyes. "Maybe we can't change the past, but we can create a better future." In the nights that followed, as the fire flickered in the cabin, Alex sat beside his two dogs, quietly reflecting on his journey. He knew nothing lasts forever, but at least in this moment, they had found a place to belong. And for Alex, that was all that mattered. A place of peace, where he no longer felt alone. Every night, when the snowstorm howled outside the window and the darkness enveloped the house, Alex felt an odd comfort in the presence of Hunter and Thor. They weren't just wounded dogs anymore. They had become his true companions. The three of them had weathered the snowstorms together, faced the harshest of conditions, and survived in a cold, unforgiving world. In those days, Alex began to realize something important. His life couldn't just exist in loneliness. It had to be filled with companionship and love. The presence of Hunter and Thor had changed him. They didn't just heal the wounds on his body, they healed the wounds in his soul. Every morning when he woke and saw them lying together, he felt the warmth of their love. The three of them were like a family, small but whole and strong. But not everything was smooth sailing. The winter grew harsher, and the snowstorms kept coming, obscuring any trace of life outside the cabin. Alex and the two dogs had to fight to survive in the biting cold. The cold crept into their bones, but none of the three gave up. They had to find ways to go outside for water, chop wood, and keep the house warm, even as Alex's strength began to fade. One morning, the snow had piled up so thick that Alex could barely open the cabin door. He had to use all his strength to clear the snow while Hunter and Thor stood by, loyal companions, never leaving his side. Every step in the snow was a challenge, but there was a strange strength in their presence, making him feel less alone. The three of them fought against nature, and in that moment, Alex realized he wasn't the only one carrying the burden. Hunter and Thor, though animals, were the best friends he could have ever asked for, always ready to stand by him in any situation. The feeling of exhaustion crept up. But Alex pushed himself, unwilling to give up. Hunter and Thor's eyes always looked at him with trust, and that trust gave him strength. The love between them had become a powerful source of motivation, helping the three of them overcome unimaginable hardships. The wind howled through the cracks in the door, but inside the warm cabin, the three friends sat together, finding strength in their bond. The firelight flickered on the wooden walls, creating a cozy, peaceful atmosphere. Alex sat there, his heart full of emotion as he looked at Hunter and Thor, the two German shepherds who had become his close companions. But even in that warmth, a worry lingered in his heart. Alex's health, especially his heart condition, was getting worse. Every time he tried to work, a sharp pain spread across his chest, reminding him of his frailty. The shortness of breath and fatigue often forced him to stop, placing a hand over his chest as if to catch his breath. He had grown accustomed to these pains, but the fear of his time running out never left him. Every time Alex looked into the loyal eyes of Hunter and Thor, a quiet ache settled in his chest. He didn't know if he had enough time to care for them long term. Would these difficult days stretch on, or would tomorrow come and he find himself unable to go on? The uncertainty of the future only made him feel more uneasy. He knew he couldn't be sure how much time he had left, but one thing was certain in his heart: no matter what, he wouldn't abandon them. Every morning, as the first light began to filter into the cabin, Alex would force himself to get up. His body ached, the pain never fully leaving him, but he still went outside to chop wood, change the water, and do the things he could. Yet, each time he looked into the eyes of Hunter and Thor, his mind drifted to the future. What would they do if he couldn't care for them anymore? Would they remember him? And would they be treated well when he wasn't there to look after them? One day, as Alex was cleaning the cabin, the pain hit him harder than before. He collapsed onto the table, clutching his chest, his breath coming in short gasps. Hunter and Thor immediately came to his side, breathing softly and licking his hand as if trying to comfort him. Guilt surged again in Alex's chest. He could do nothing more for them than care for them in the moment, but he couldn't be sure about the future. As the pain lingered, Alex couldn't stop thinking about what would happen to them if he didn't have the strength to go on. He knew that if he couldn't continue, their lives would be in danger, just like before when they were left in the snowstorm. These thoughts clung to him, making the anxiety and fear even more unbearable. "Thank you for being here," Alex whispered, his eyes clouded with a sorrow too deep for words. A difficult decision was slowly forming in his heart. The bond between him and the two dogs couldn't be broken, but the time he had left to care for them was running out. The struggle in his heart wasn't just about keeping them or letting them go. It was about the responsibility he had to bear, and what he could leave behind for them when he wasn't there. Fear of the future swarmed Alex's mind, but he couldn't let that fear dictate his present. Thoughts of his heart condition, the pain, and the fear of survival sometimes made him feel like he couldn't continue. But he didn't always sink into those worries. Sometimes, when he looked into Hunter and Thor's eyes, he found a little peace, a little hope. One morning, as light began to filter through the cabin window, there was a knock at the door. It was Emma Thornton, a wildlife researcher Alex had never met before. She arrived with a proposal that made Alex's heart skip a beat. "Hello, Alex," Emma said softly as she stepped into the cabin, taking in the warmth of the space around her. "I'm Emma Thornton, and I'm here to talk to you about Hunter and Thor." Alex stood up, a wave of nervousness hitting him, his fists clenching. What Emma said made him feel overwhelmed, but also like a huge challenge was ahead of him. "As you know, Hunter and Thor are no ordinary dogs. They're warriors, and I think if you let them go, there's a great opportunity for them. I want to propose that they be trained as K9S for the Silverstone Police Force." Alex looked into Emma's eyes, the vague feeling of her words still lingering in his mind. He didn't fully understand the role of a K9, but there was one thing he knew for sure. He didn't want to lose them. "The police?" Alex repeated quietly, trying to grasp what Emma had just said. "Yes, it's a great opportunity for them. They'll be trained to do rescue work, assist in emergency situations, help the community, and most importantly, they'll have a full life, a life with purpose." Each of Emma's words echoed in Alex's mind like a sharp knock, forcing him to pause and think. He glanced over at Hunter and Thor, the two German shepherds lying together in the corner of the room, their loyal eyes filled with hope as they looked up at him. They didn't know about this conversation, about the huge decision he had to make. Alex moved toward the window, gazing out at the forests surrounding the cabin. The wind gently swayed the trees, carrying the scent of wood and damp earth. He couldn't stop thinking about what Emma had said. As K9s, they would have a better life, be trained to help others. But that also meant he would lose them. Not immediately, but one day they would have to leave. One day they wouldn't be by his side anymore. He couldn't help but remember the first days when Hunter and Thor had come to him. Abandoned in the snowstorm, these animals who had lost all hope, yet they had become his irreplaceable companions. They had brought him moments of joy, moments where he didn't feel alone anymore. But now, with Emma's offer, all he could do was let them go. Alex turned to face Emma, his eyes full of inner conflict. "Will they be happy?" he asked, his voice trembling with fear. Emma nodded. "Yes, Alex. This is their chance. If they're trained properly, they'll become skilled rescue dogs, able to help in many dangerous situations, and they won't have to live a life of being abandoned." As an animal lover, Alex understood that this was the best chance Hunter and Thor could have. But his heart ached. How could he let them go, even if it was for their future? The three of them had been through so much together. They had saved him from loneliness, had made his life brighter. And now he had to face this difficult decision. Keep them and continue living in uncertain days, or let them go and continue their journey of helping others? Alex couldn't answer immediately. His thoughts and emotions intertwined, making him feel trapped between two choices. Even though he knew this was the right decision, his heart couldn't let go. The memories of the first days when he met them still felt fresh in his mind. But sometimes, love means letting go, not holding on. "I need time to think," Alex said, his eyes cast downward, his voice soft. "I can't decide right away." Emma smiled gently. "I understand, but I'll be here to help you with whatever decision you make." Alex nodded, a deep sense of worry still lingering in his chest. He knew that whatever decision he made, nothing would ever be the same again. Over the past days, he had grown so close to Hunter and Thor, seeing them as real friends, the only companions in his lonely life. The quiet moments by the fire, the times they had endured the snowstorms together, it all felt etched into his heart. But he also understood that sometimes love wasn't about holding on. It was about giving them the freedom to find a new path. Alex walked to the window and gazed outside, where the snow still fell, covering the vast land in a blanket of white. The scenery was peaceful, as it always had been, but inside his mind was a storm, tangled with fear and uncertainty. He couldn't stop thinking about what Emma had said. "This is their only chance," her words echoed in his head. She was right. This was Hunter and Thor's chance to have a new life, a life with purpose, a life where they could help others, rather than live forever in this lonely cabin with him. But why was it so hard? Why did the thought of losing them hurt so much? The bond between them had grown so deep. It wasn't just about rescuing each other from the snowy night. It was about friendship, about a connection Alex had never expected to find. Even with the wounds on his heart, they had become his companions, his family. Alex looked down at Hunter and Thor, still lying quietly on the floor, their eyes sparkling with loyalty and love. He took a deep breath, feeling the pain spread throughout his body, not from his physical condition, but from his heart. He knew that keeping them wasn't the right decision. They couldn't live a full life here, in this cabin, with its silent walls. They needed a new life, one filled with challenges, but also with meaning. And he had to let them go. "We've had beautiful moments together," Alex whispered, his eyes welling up. "But you'll have a better life if you take this new path. I love you. I truly love you." Though these words were so hard to say, they had to be said. It was the truth he couldn't escape. He had realized that letting them go didn't mean he didn't love them anymore. It meant that he loved them enough to let them go, to stop holding them back with his fear and loneliness. He loved them enough to give them the life they deserved. Finally, Alex turned to Emma, his gaze now resolved. "I'll do what needs to be done," he said, his voice lower, steadier. "This is the best decision for them, right?" Emma smiled, gently nodding. "Yes, Alex. This is the path where they'll grow and live with purpose." Part of him still wasn't ready, still felt his heart breaking at the thought of saying goodbye. But another part of him felt peace. It was the peace of a difficult decision, but the right one. Alex's story with Hunter and Thor wasn't the end, but a new beginning, a new journey for all of them. Alex walked over to Hunter and Thor, gently stroking them one last time. "Thank you for being part of my life," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Live well, okay? And remember, I'll always remember you." Hunter and Thor looked up at him, their eyes filled with all the love and loyalty that words could never capture. It was a painful goodbye, but also a release for all of them. Alex's heart felt as though it was being squeezed tight, unable to express the depth of his pain as he gazed into their eyes, eyes that held everything he had found in them: love, unwavering loyalty, and a friendship he never imagined having. The pain he felt wasn't just from the goodbye. It was also because a part of him felt unworthy of the love Hunter and Thor had given him. They were loyal creatures, not caring about his past, the wounds in his heart, or the loneliness he had endured. And in this moment, as he stood facing the decision to let them go, he felt an overwhelming emptiness, as if a piece of himself had been torn away. "I don't want you to go," Alex whispered, his voice breaking. "But you deserve a better life, not living in this cabin with me. You deserve a life with purpose." Thor gently shook his head, as if understanding every word he said. Hunter, sensing Alex's emotions, moved closer to him, nudging his hand with his nose, as if trying to comfort him. Thor's eyes remained fixed on Alex, unblinking, as though trying to give him strength. Even though they couldn't speak, everything they did showed they understood and respected his decision. Alex quietly sat down, placing his hand on Thor's head. The touch was soft, but it carried so much weight. He could feel the warmth of their bodies, the creatures he had cared for, the ones he had saved during those difficult days. Even though he knew this was the right decision, the pain wouldn't go away. He couldn't stop thinking about the loneliness that would consume him once they were gone. "I wish you could find a new family, a family you deserve," Alex said, his voice breaking again, tears welling in his eyes. "You'll always be in my heart." In those final moments, as Alex touched their heads, it felt as if time had stopped. Memories of the days spent with them flooded his mind, simple moments that held so much meaning. Alex wondered if he could keep going without them by his side. But then he realized that even though they wouldn't be with him anymore, the love they had given him would never fade. And then Alex stood up, looking into their eyes one last time. "Goodbye," he whispered, the pain tearing at his heart. "I'll always remember you." With that, Hunter and Thor, at Emma's command, walked toward the vehicle. Their eyes remained fixed on Alex, as though they didn't want to leave him, but also understood that this was a decision for all their benefit. The bond between them and Alex was eternal, something that would never fade. As the vehicle slowly disappeared from view, Alex stood still in silence, surrounded only by a mixture of emotions. He realized that no matter how lonely he felt, no matter how much everything changed, the love and memories of Hunter and Thor would never be lost. But at the same time, he also felt something else, something new beginning to grow inside him. Something inside Alex had shifted. Peace, a calm that came with knowing he couldn't keep them, but also understanding that sometimes love isn't about holding on, but giving someone the freedom to find their own path. Their story didn't end here. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, a new journey. Alex turned back into the cabin, walked over to the fire, and sat down. What he was facing wasn't loneliness, but the acceptance that sometimes love meant letting go, not keeping them close, but allowing them to find their way. That night, the cabin felt strangely peaceful, without the sound of Thor or Hunter's barks, without the trusting look they always gave him. But the longing wasn't the only thing filling his mind. A sense of unease began to rise in Alex's chest when he realized that he hadn't fully freed himself from their bond. The quiet felt like a trap, not the release he had expected. Suddenly, a sound outside made Alex jump, the sound of footsteps in the snow, as if someone was approaching the cabin. Alex quickly stood, his hand instinctively grabbing the hunting rifle that he had kept close during these lonely months. He couldn't shake the feeling of fear. Something was wrong. No matter who was out there, they couldn't miss the light from the cabin, and Alex couldn't risk anyone discovering Hunter and Thor, the two dogs that had been his constant companions. His heart tightened as he heard a knock on the door, soft but full of meaning, like a warning. He knew he couldn't let himself be lost, couldn't let Hunter and Thor fall into the hands of people he didn't know. Alex carefully peered through the window, but the night was too dark, and everything outside was too blurry. He sighed, exhaustion rising in his chest, but he knew he had to face whatever was out there. "Is someone out there?" Alex called, his voice rough. Silence answered, but he could feel someone's presence. The footsteps grew louder. In that brief moment, a few shadows flickered in his mind. They weren't just strangers or lost travelers. They were a group of hired hunters, people Alex had only heard of in dangerous stories about secret deals and hunts. They weren't here for help. They were here to take the dogs. Anger and fear surged in Alex's chest. He knew that no matter what he decided, this wouldn't be an easy fight. The cold from outside seemed to seep through the window and the thin walls of the cabin, but it was nothing compared to the burning anger inside him. When the cabin door opened, a group of 4 men stepped in, their eyes cold and driven by greed. "We know there are 2 valuable dogs here," the oldest man said, his voice as cold as the winter air. "We don't want to hurt anyone, but we need to take them." No more words were needed. Alex knew exactly what they wanted. These men weren't here to make them companions. They wanted to sell the dogs for profit. He couldn't let that happen. "No," Alex shouted, stepping forward, his grip tight on the rifle. "You're not taking them." Everything happened in an instant. One of the hunters pulled out a large knife, while the others quickly circled Alex, hoping to overpower him. But he couldn't let fear take hold. Over the past few days, Hunter and Thor had helped him face many challenges, and now He was going to protect them no matter what. With a swift move, Alex fired a shot into the air, creating a loud bang that startled the hunters. But it wasn't enough to stop them. The confrontation turned into a fight for survival between Alex and the group of hunters, with Hunter and Thor still inside the cabin, powerless to help. Alex did everything he could to push them back, shoving one out the door and then fighting off the others. One of them grabbed Alex's arm, but Alex broke free, forced to protect himself. Sweat dripped down his forehead as the hunters kept closing in, but Alex wouldn't stop. Not ever. Each punch, each swing, was a decision to protect Hunter and Thor. Alex couldn't give up, couldn't let them be taken. His actions weren't just about defending the dogs, they were about protecting his life, the life he had painstakingly rebuilt over the past months. Then, in a brief moment, Alex realized something. This wasn't just a fight between man and hunters, it was a battle between faith and determination, between sacrifice and courage. When the last hunter finally ran off, it wasn't because Alex had won completely, but because he had proved one thing: he couldn't be beaten. The tension in the air seemed to dissipate, but his heart still raced, each beat a reminder of survival and the pain that lingered in every muscle of his exhausted body. His body trembled, drained from the life or death battle, but his spirit stood strong. He had protected Hunter and Thor, but the price wasn't just physical wounds. It was the sacrifice of courage and determination. Alex stood there, panting, his eyes locked on the retreating hunters. They hadn't been fully defeated. They'd left because they knew that a man as resilient as Alex couldn't be subdued. But in that moment, Alex felt the full weight of the pain he had endured. He had fought to protect these dogs, his only true companions in the harsh, lonely world. To him, they weren't just animals. They were souls he had connected with, who had shared in the struggles, the lonely nights in this cold, barren land. Alex raised a hand to his face, trying to catch his breath. His legs were steady, but he felt as though he could collapse at any moment. The battle scars still marked his body, and though he had won this fight, Alex knew it wasn't a complete victory. He had protected Hunter and Thor, but at the cost of his own health that had already been worn down by his ongoing heart condition. He looked over at Hunter and Thor, still lying on the cabin floor, their eyes meeting his with gratitude and unwavering loyalty. Despite the fatigue, they slowly got up, shaking their bodies as if to reassure him. Knowing that they had come through this together, they moved closer to him. Alex felt the warmth of their presence, and that was the reason he fought until the very end. "We've made it through," Alex sighed, gently stroking their heads. "But I'm not sure how much more I can do." He sat down, his hands trembling. It wasn't just physical exhaustion, it was the swirling thoughts in his mind. He felt like he was chasing his own shadow, each victory pulling him closer to an inevitable end. The feeling of loss became more pronounced as he thought about the future. Even though he had won this battle, his health wouldn't allow him to keep up this long journey. But despite the difficulty, despite the cruelty, he couldn't let go of these dogs. The bond between the three of them, one man and two dogs, was built not just on actions, but on understanding and determination. Though other battles would come, he knew they would never be left behind. They would always be together, until nothing could stop them. Alex tried to stand up, moving towards the window to look outside. The cold wind still blew, but at least in this moment, he didn't feel alone anymore. Reason and emotion intertwined, but he knew, no matter what the cost, protecting Hunter and Thor was the right decision, especially when he thought about the dangers they might face again. As the light from the oil lamp in the cabin cast long shadows on the wooden floor, Alex felt his body sag with exhaustion. He looked at the two dogs lying by the fire and couldn't help but think about a different future. a future where they wouldn't have to live in fear. Alex knew that when the world outside was so dangerous, he couldn't continue to live under the illusion that this cabin would protect them forever. He had thought about letting them go, sending them to a safer place where they could have a better life. But that thought struck him like a knife to the heart. Over these days, Hunter and Thor had become a part of his life, his friends who not only helped him fight loneliness, but also taught him how to love again. There was only one choice left. Could he continue to care for them? Keep them here with him, while the world outside remained so dangerous? Or did he have to send them out into this world to give them a brighter future? It hurt him deeply. The three of them would face separation, knowing that it was the right decision. But as their protector, Alex couldn't ignore that he couldn't keep them here forever when the world outside was still full of dangers. "What do we do next?" Alex whispered to himself, his eyes on the window where the wind played with the snow. "I can't leave you alone out there with all the dangers, but I can't live without you by my side." He had waited so long to find something real, something that could make him feel truly loved. And now, letting them go would be a brutal shock to his heart. Alex turned to look into Hunter and Thor's eyes full of loyalty that no words could ever express. "I know you'll do better if you're properly cared for. I know we can find a safe place where you won't have to be afraid anymore. But I can't bear this goodbye." He moved closer to them, sitting down and gently stroking the soft fur on Hunter's back. "This isn't easy, you know? But I have to do this for you. We can't keep living in the shadows, can we?" Every word he spoke felt like an unwanted goodbye, but the eyes of the two dogs seemed to understand, looking at him with gratitude as if saying, "We understand." As the night fell, Alex sat quietly beside them, his hand still resting on their soft fur. The time had come for him to make a decision. Letting them go might be a sacrifice, but it was also the right step for their future. Alex felt the pain hit him like a wave crashing against his heart. But he knew that no matter what, the important thing was to protect these lives, to make sure they could live in a world free of danger. Alex looked into the eyes of Hunter and Thor, feeling the warmth in their gaze. They lay close to him, their loyal, gentle eyes reflecting all they had been through, all he had witnessed. It was as if the past had become an unchangeable part of them. But not everything in the past had been bad. Alex felt the love and loyalty in every glance they shared with him. Yet, when the truth hit him, he knew he couldn't keep them forever. One thing was certain. Whether he wanted it or not, Hunter and Thor's future couldn't be confined to this cold cabin. Alex understood that they needed a different place, a safer one where they could grow and do what they were born to do. These dogs were not warriors meant to face danger at every turn. They deserved a better life. "It's time, isn't it?" Alex whispered, his hands still clutching their soft fur. Silence filled the room. Only the steady breathing of the animals he had chosen to protect remained. Alex decided to take them to the nearby veterinary hospital, a place where they could recover fully and find a better environment. Though he knew this would be a difficult decision, he couldn't let them live forever in fear while the world outside remained full of dangers he couldn't control. This choice, though painful, was the best for all three of them. Alex felt like the time had come for them to go, to find their own path. There was only one thing that broke his heart: the unavoidable separation. He had grown too familiar with loneliness, but saying goodbye to Hunter and Thor, his loyal friends, was something he had never prepared himself for. Alex stood up, gently patting them on the back. His eyes were filled with tears. "You've helped me so much," he said, his voice hoarse. "It's time for you to go find a new life. I won't be able to do anything for you anymore, but I'll always remember you." In the darkness of the cabin, only the faint glow of the lamps illuminated the space. But that light was enough for Alex to see his dogs, his friends, who he would never forget. Even though Hunter and Thor were being taken to the veterinary hospital to recover, the silence in the cabin made him feel emptier than ever. There were no footsteps, no scratching at the floor, and no warmth from their fur. Alex felt a tightness in his chest, a heavy feeling flooding his mind. He couldn't shake the images of the coming farewell. As he stepped outside, he saw the trucks heading toward the hospital, and he knew that the chapter he had shared with these two dogs, his companions, was coming to a painful end. Alex stood there, his heart heavy, as he watched Hunter and Thor. They were his loyal companions, his family in this lonely world. The love and bond they shared could never be denied. Each day, they had faced the difficulties together, and now, he was letting them go, for their future. He whispered, his voice trembling, "After everything, you're still my family." His eyes gazed upwards, the weight of his words sinking deep into his soul. "Thank you for being with me, even if it was just for a short time." Saying those words was no easy task. Every syllable felt like a burden, but also like a release. As he stood there, feeling the warmth of Hunter and Thor beside him, the world around him seemed to slow down. The steady rhythm of their breathing and the warmth of their bodies gave him comfort in this final moment. It was as though, in that brief instant, he and the dogs both understood that their time together was coming to an end. Hunter and Thor, the animals he had saved and cared for, were now on their way to a new life. No longer would they need to live in the isolation of this cabin. But as he looked into their eyes, he noticed something, a strange blend of worry and fatigue. Even though they didn't speak, Alex knew they too felt the shift, the change in the air. Alex had always known this day would come. He had prepared his heart, but when it was time to let them go, it still hurt deeply. Pain, regret, and the loss of something irreplaceable weighed heavily on him. These dogs had become his companions, and now he had to watch them leave, hoping they would find a life far from the threats of the snowstorms and the loneliness that had once consumed him. The love between him and them was undeniable. Every day had been a shared moment of hardship, of surviving together. But Alex understood, no matter how much he loved them, he couldn't keep them forever. Their lives couldn't be confined to the cold walls of a cabin in the mountains. They deserved safety, a better future, a life where they could do meaningful work helping others. And Alex knew he couldn't stand in the way of that. With a final glance at his beloved dogs, Alex's heart felt a mixture of loss and acceptance. He couldn't keep them in his world of uncertainty any longer, but he could give them the chance to have a life filled with purpose and freedom. And with that, he took a deep breath, knowing he had made the right decision. "We have to move on," Alex whispered, his heart filled with sorrow. "You're not just dogs, you're warriors, and the world needs you." The next step in their journey was a path toward the future. Every step Alex took was a sacrifice. He knew this wasn't easy, but he understood that he had to face the reality of giving Hunter and Thor the best opportunity they could have. The pain didn't only come from the goodbye, but from the feeling that, despite everything he had done for them, he couldn't continue the journey with them into the new life ahead. Their eyes still sparkled with trust and gratitude, but also with a trace of worry and inevitable sadness. A part of Alex wanted to keep them, but reason and love prevailed. He knew that love wasn't about possession. It was about letting go. Alex turned back into the cabin, the place where he had spent so many lonely days. As he looked out the window, he felt the stillness settle around him. No more crashing waves, no more biting winds. All that remained was an empty feeling, but also a sense of peace. The days spent with Hunter and Thor had become treasured memories in his life, and even though they weren't there, Alex could still feel that bond. "We'll always remember each other," Alex whispered to himself, filled with a bitter-sweet calm. The next days in his cabin were filled with the silence of loneliness. The fire in the hearth gave off a warm glow, but nothing could fill the emptiness in his heart when he thought of Hunter and Thor. The two dogs were recovering at the veterinary hospital, but Alex's mind couldn't escape the constant worry about his own health. Alex's heart condition never went away. Each passing day, he felt his exhaustion deepen. Even though Dr. Rachel Moore still visited him regularly, the sharp pains and unending fatigue made it impossible for Alex to keep his spirits up. Dr. Moore checked on him frequently, sometimes to see if there was anything she could do to improve his health. But most of the time, all she could do was encourage Alex to hold on to hope. Whenever she held his hand, her soft words were the only comfort he had, easing the pain in his heart. "Alex, you can make it through," she would say, but deep in her eyes, Alex could see the concern she couldn't hide. Sometimes he wondered how much longer he could endure, when his body had weakened to the point where he didn't trust himself anymore. Each morning, when the light filtered into the cold room, Alex would begin another day with a sharp pain in his chest. But what hurt him more than the physical pain was the memory of Hunter and Thor, the friends he had tried so hard to save, who were now slowly drifting further away from him. Yet, loneliness wasn't always destructive. Alex knew the dogs were recovering, and although he couldn't be with them, he found peace in his heart when he thought about them. He remembered every moment they had shared, those times when they would simply look at him with eyes full of loyalty. Each gaze felt like a promise that no matter how life changed, they would always be there with him. The price of their friendship was heavy. Alex felt more clearly than ever that the recovery of Hunter and Thor might be their final goodbye. As much as he wanted to keep them by his side, he understood that the most important thing was their future, not the temporary comfort he could give them. "I can't keep them here forever," Alex whispered, his voice weak. His whole body shook at the thought of letting them go, but in his heart, he knew this was the sacrifice he had to make so they could have a better life. With each passing day, the cabin grew quieter. The sounds of the wind, of animals in the woods, echoed in Alex's mind. But there was no laughter from Hunter, no happy barks from Thor. The silence felt like a constant reminder of a truth he couldn't avoid. Things would never be the same. Dr. Moore had advised him many times that letting them go was the best thing. She knew that if he didn't give Hunter and Thor a chance to live in a better environment, they would only live in the embrace of loneliness and fear. But that didn't ease the loss Alex felt in his heart. Every time he thought about them not being by his side anymore, it felt like a part of his soul was breaking. As the days passed, Alex's health grew worse. The heart attacks kept coming, making him feel like his body was slowly falling apart. Meanwhile, Hunter and Thor had recovered quite well at the veterinary hospital. They no longer had serious wounds and were beginning to adjust to their new life. But Alex's worry never stopped. He could feel the loneliness slowly creeping in, as if everything he had worked so hard for was slipping away. One late night, as Alex sat alone by the fire, the light from the oil lamp flickered, and he couldn't stop thinking about Hunter and Thor. Their joyful barks, the sound of their paws gently tapping the floor. It was all just a memory now. The room was quiet, but his mind screamed with the pain. He knew that no matter how hard he tried, the dogs couldn't stay forever. That was the truth, but his heart couldn't accept it so easily. They had become a part of his life, his only friends in a vast, quiet world. Now, seeing them healthy and ready to leave, Alex wasn't sure how he could live on in this loneliness. The greatest pain wasn't their leaving, but the realization that he couldn't stop this process. He couldn't keep them, couldn't create a different future for these three friends. All he could do was accept it. But that wasn't easy. Every step they took, every time they wagged their tails and looked at him like they were saying goodbye, tore his heart apart. Alex knew he had done the right thing by letting them go, by giving them a chance at a better life. But that didn't mean he didn't feel empty. All he could do was watch, sit silently, and feel the emptiness fill his heart. In Alex's eyes, the freedom for Hunter and Thor was an act of love, but it was also filled with pain. Alex couldn't stop thinking about whether he could live on his own again, like he had before. The long, lonely days, the nights without the joyful sounds of Hunter and Thor by his side, could he endure it? Every night he lay still, feeling the pain in his chest, the passing days with no one to share them with, the days where it was only him facing the fear of the death that was creeping closer. He turned back to the dark room, where only the faint light of the oil lamp cast shadows on the walls. He'd tried to forget the pain of his own sickness, but now, looking at Hunter and Thor, the unavoidable truth became clearer than ever. His heart disease was worsening, each sharp pain not just discomfort, but a harsh warning from his body. The weariness seemed to have engulfed Alex's entire body. In the past, he had lived with freedom, feeling strong and independent, but now each step felt harder. He knew he couldn't live like this forever, and even worse, he couldn't continue to care for Hunter and Thor the way he had before. These dogs, once rescued, were now dependent on him for a new life. But he also realized that he couldn't sustain this protection for much longer. The pain grew as Alex realized he was running out of energy, not just physically, but mentally as well. The feeling that he was living in a situation he couldn't control made him feel drained. He had tried to be a companion to Hunter and Thor, taking care of them each day, but as time went on, it felt like the weight was slowly crushing him. "You'll be all right," Alex whispered, but inside he wasn't sure. Thor and Hunter's eyes never left him, their loyalty unshaken. They had become his family, but he couldn't help them forever. It was a truth too hard to face, but he knew it was the best thing for them. They needed to continue their journey in life, and he couldn't be the one to hold them back from the world beyond. Alex sat down next to them, saying nothing, only feeling their presence. These days, with the pain in every breath, it felt like his whole life was slowly closing in on him. But he knew that, no matter how much it hurt, this sacrifice was the right thing to do. But every time he looked at them, the pain in his heart grew deeper. Hunter and Thor's loyalty had made him feel less alone in a world filled with darkness, but he couldn't keep them with him forever. When he looked into their dark eyes, Alex felt the connection between them. The days spent sharing the warm cabin with them were precious moments he would never forget. The snowstorms, the long, sleepless nights, and the steady sound of their breathing were sounds etched into Alex's memory, reminding him that there were moments of peace, even if just for a fleeting moment. Hunter stood near him, eyes still fixed forward, as if preparing for a new journey. Thor lay beside him, his sleek fur still holding the strength Alex had seen in the beginning. The change in them wasn't just physical recovery, but a change in their spirits as well. They were ready for a new life, one that Alex couldn't be a part of. Alex gently reached out, stroking their soft fur with tenderness. "You deserve a better life, one where you can do good, help others," he whispered, his heart heavy. He knew he couldn't keep them with him. Though it pained him deeply, he understood that letting them go was the right thing to do. Dr. Moore had explained many times the importance of letting Hunter and Thor join the K9 unit, that they could save countless lives. Alex understood that, but nothing could ease the pain of having to say goodbye. Every time he saw them preparing for their new journey, his heart tightened. "You won't be with me anymore, but I always knew you'd do something amazing," Alex continued, his voice breaking, as if words couldn't capture the love he felt for them. His eyes dropped to an old photo on the table, one of his grandfather, the man who had always taught him that love wasn't about possession, but about letting the one you love find their own path. And now it was time for Alex to apply that lesson. As the two dogs were prepared to leave, a wave of emptiness surged in Alex's chest. The days he had spent with them had filled the void in his heart. But now, as they stepped out, searching for a new life, Alex couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of uncertainty about the future. Would they be happy? Would they find a truly safe place? Those questions kept spinning in his mind. Looking at the silhouettes of Hunter and Thor as they prepared to leave, Alex couldn't suppress a sigh. They had been there for him in his loneliest moments, and now he had to let go. Though it hurt, he knew, no matter what, this was the best thing for them. As the truck carrying them drove out of sight, Alex stood still, alone. The surrounding space remained silent, but inside, a storm raged. Losing them was a huge sacrifice, but it was also the gift he could give them, so they could have a more deserving future. "Good luck, Hunter Thor," Alex whispered, his gaze filled with sadness but also pride. "You've changed my life. I'll never forget you." As the truck with the two dogs slowly disappeared around the bend, Alex stood motionless, watching their silhouettes fade. A powerful wave of emotion surged within him. The months spent with Hunter and Thor had become an inseparable part of his life. The moments they shared together had become irreplaceable memories. Although he had to let them go, his heart felt heavier. In fact, it felt like a heavy stone pressing against his chest. Each of their steps disappeared behind the trees, but in Alex's mind, those images would never fade. He had been through so much with them, the snowy nights, the cold mornings when they woke up together, facing the world. Those moments were etched in his memory. Every time he looked into their gentle eyes, he saw a piece of himself in them. They were companions, protectors, and family. Tears he couldn't hold back fell as Alex watched their figures disappear. The feeling of emptiness enveloped him. It was the pain of separation, of a goodbye he never wanted to say, but knew was necessary. Alex stood silently for a moment, absorbing the stillness that had settled in the cabin. As the truck carrying Hunter and Thor disappeared from view, he knew deep in his heart that he had made the right choice, even though the pain of their departure would forever be etched in his soul. The love and companionship they had shared were irreplaceable, but he knew that they deserved a better life than the one they could have with him in the isolation of this cabin. He walked back inside, gazing at the empty space where they had once been. The house felt different, quieter, and yet there was a strange sense of peace. There was no more barking, no more gentle footsteps padding along the floor, just the soft rustle of the wind outside and the stillness that had replaced the lively warmth they had brought into his life. Alex sank down on the windowsill, staring out into the vast wilderness that surrounded him. The landscape seemed almost unchanged, but for him, it had transformed forever. He felt the weight of the years spent in solitude, now shared with two loyal companions, and even though they were gone, their presence lingered in every corner of the cabin. The thought of the life they would now lead gave him a small sense of comfort. Hunter and Thor would be safe. They would be cared for by people who understood their needs and could give them a life full of purpose. The thought that they were moving on to something better, even if it meant their absence from his life, eased some of the heaviness in his chest. As Alex sat there, he let his mind wander back to the moments they had shared, the quiet nights by the fire, the times they had braved the harsh elements together. Those memories now felt like treasures, fragile but precious. The bond he had formed with them had not been just a human-animal connection, but something deeper, a friendship that transcended words. The bed where they used to sleep was now empty, just a reminder of their presence. Hunter's toy bone still lay by the fireplace, and Thor's collar remained on the table, each item a subtle hint of what was once there. But even as he stared at these things, Alex didn't feel the crushing loneliness he might have expected. Instead, there was a sense of closure, of a chapter ending with grace. Looking out the window one last time, Alex thought about the paths they had walked together. Every trail they had followed, every struggle they had endured, had woven their lives into a tapestry of shared experiences. And though the trails had led them in different directions, the memories would remain, like footprints in the snow, fading but never forgotten. "Goodbye, my friends," Alex whispered, feeling the quiet assurance that, despite the pain, he had made the right choice. They would have a better life, and so would he. The journey was over, but in its place, he had found peace. Alex looked out the window, the fading light of the evening casting long shadows across the cabin. The wind still howled, but inside, a deep sense of calm settled over him. He had made peace with his decision, the painful choice to let go of Hunter and Thor. Though they were no longer with him, their love and loyalty remained forever etched in his heart. "They will have a better life," he whispered to himself, the words offering him a sense of relief, even though it was bittersweet. He knew he had done the right thing, even if it hurt. The dogs deserved more, a life with purpose, a life away from the cold and isolation of this cabin. They had been his companions, his family, and now they would go on to help others, to be part of something bigger. With that thought, Alex felt the weight of the years he had spent with Hunter and Thor, all the struggles and the quiet moments of peace they shared. Despite his failing health, despite the overwhelming sense of loss, there was a deep peace in his heart. He had done what he could for them, and now they would do what they were born to do. They were strong, and Alex had given them the best gift he could: freedom. As the wind whistled through the trees outside, Alex closed his eyes and let the memories flood his mind. He remembered the first time he had met Hunter and Thor, the fear and the misunderstanding, the slow and difficult process of building trust, and the bond that had grown stronger with each passing day. Those moments, those connections, were what mattered most to him now. And though they were gone, their love for him and his love for them would remain. He couldn't change the past, but he had made a difference in their lives. And in doing so, he had found something he never thought he would: peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from a perfect world, but the kind that came from acceptance, from knowing that love, even when it meant letting go, was the most powerful force of all. "Thank you," Alex whispered to the night, to the memory of his beloved dogs. "Thank you for everything." In the stillness of the cabin, Alex sat for a long while, feeling the quiet presence of Hunter and Thor in his heart. The night outside was cold, but within him a warmth lingered. The love he had shared with them, the lessons they had taught him, would never fade. Even as he faced the challenges of his own health, even as he prepared for the final chapter of his own story, he knew one thing: love, true love, never leaves us. It endures in the memories, in the quiet moments, and in the knowledge that no matter where life takes us, the love we give and receive is what truly makes us whole. In that moment, Alex realized that life isn't just about what he's lived, but also about what he leaves behind. The memories of friendship and loyalty would be the precious legacy he'd carry with him for the rest of his life, even when he had to leave this world behind. Dr. Rachel Moore visited Alex on a quiet morning. She looked at him with eyes full of understanding, but also a hint of sadness. She knew that Alex's time was running out. His body's wounds, the heart pains he was suffering were all signs that he was slowly drifting away from this world. "Alex," Dr. Moore began, her voice soft. "I'm sorry, but your time is running out. We'll continue with the treatment, but I think it's time for you to prepare yourself." Alex looked into her eyes, feeling the sincerity in her gaze. But strangely, in that moment, he didn't feel fear or anxiety. Yes, his body was weakening, but in his soul there was an unusual peace. Facing death, Alex didn't feel as terrified as he once did. Everything he'd gone through, everything he'd received from Hunter and Thor, had helped him find peace in his heart. "It's okay, Rachel," Alex said, his voice warm but calm, without fear. "I've lived a full life. I have wonderful friends, and that makes me happy." Dr. Moore looked at him, silent, just quietly nodding. She had known for a long time that no matter what, Alex had found peace within himself. The memories of the time spent with Hunter and Thor had healed deep wounds that no one could see. Those simple moments, those times when they lay by his side, those looks full of loyalty, all of those had helped Alex realize that even though life is short, he'd had a meaningful life. Alex gave a light smile, his eyes drifting to the window, where the cold winds still blew through. But in his heart, an unusual warmth spread. "Hunter, Thor," he whispered, "thank you for helping me find faith in life. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." They were dogs who didn't just protect him, but also taught him about unconditional love. The time with Hunter and Thor wasn't just about surviving. It was about finding himself. He no longer felt alone in this world because he had such wonderful friends. The loneliness that once haunted him had faded away when Hunter and Thor came into his life. The love and the loyalty they gave him was something words couldn't express, but it was the flame that lit up his heart. "Thank you," Alex whispered, gently stroking Hunter's fur, the one who had always been by his side all this time. "Thank you for being with me." Those words came from his heart like a deeply emotional goodbye. He knew that, even though he couldn't keep them forever, these moments would forever be the most beautiful memories of his life. The unconditional love Hunter and Thor had given him was a priceless lesson about loyalty and dedication, things he'd never experienced in his life before. Alex's health was continuing to deteriorate, and Dr. Moore had stopped offering the advice she used to. His heart disease had weakened his body, but throughout this time, the days spent with Hunter and Thor had been the happiest of his life. Alex glanced up at the ceiling, his eyes clouded with tears he couldn't stop. He knew death was drawing near, but somehow he wasn't afraid. There was no fear in him because he had lived a full life, filled with deep, sincere love. In this moment, a strange kind of peace washed over him. Even though his time here was ending, the love of Hunter and Thor would remain with him, never fading. "You'll always be in my heart," Alex whispered, his eyes soft as they settled on Hunter and Thor. "Thank you for bringing me back to life, in spirit." Though his body was weakening, Alex's heart was full of trust and hope. The fear of leaving this world was gone, replaced by the love he felt from his loyal companions. Hunter and Thor had helped him rediscover who he was, and that, he realized, was the most precious gift in life. When Dr. Moore came in for the last time, she didn't say a word. She just looked at Alex silently, understanding what he already knew, that it was time for him to go. But she also knew that Alex had been filled with love, loyalty, and a bond that went beyond words. His dogs were more than just pets. They were his strength, his reason to keep going when life had been at its hardest. Those memories would live on, like a beautiful legacy of a great friendship. In his final moments, Alex smiled. He had lived a life well spent, and with Hunter and Thor by his side, he no longer felt alone. Death might be close, but fear had no place in him. He knew that the moments he shared with these two dogs would stay with him forever, even after he was gone. The pain in his chest had eased. Alex felt an unexpected calm, a kind of tranquility he'd never known during the years of fighting illness and haunted by war memories. His life wasn't just about what he had lived through. It was about the deep, meaningful connections he had made, especially with Hunter and Thor. Even though they couldn't be with him at the very end, their love would never leave him. Alex looked out the window, where the dimming light of the sunset fell on the cold earth. It was a familiar sight, one he'd seen countless times before. The peace he felt now didn't come from the presence of another person, but from the memories of Hunter and Thor. They didn't have to be there in the flesh to show their love. Their presence, alive in his mind, was enough to light up the darkest corners of his life. He thought back to the first time he met them, the creatures he had once believed to be predators. But soon after, the misunderstanding faded, and an invisible bond formed between the three of them. Those two dogs taught him about loyalty, sacrifice, and the power of friendship. Every time Alex looked into the eyes of Hunter and Thor, he saw pure sincerity. No secrets, only love and protection. "You've changed my life," Alex whispered in his heart. Though no one was there with him now, he found comfort in knowing that his dogs were living good lives of their own, helping others along the way. That, to Alex, was the most important part of his journey. Though he was leaving, Hunter and Thor would always be with him, in spirit. He felt their love and loyalty with every breath he took, and he knew they weren't just pets. They were his companions, who had stood by him through it all, making his life whole. Through the hardest times in life, Alex found something he could never lose: connection. It wasn't just about being physically present anymore, but the bond, that invisible thread between him and his dogs, that remained forever in his heart. When Alex took his final breath, there were no tears, no one by his side to handle the arrangements, but he wasn't lonely. His heart was full of peace because he knew he had lived a life full of purpose, that he had done the right thing. His life wasn't just about what he had endured, but about what he left behind, the beautiful memories of love, persistence, and loyalty he built with Hunter and Thor. Even though they couldn't stay beside him, Hunter and Thor carried with them the values Alex had instilled in them. Their story wasn't just one of loss, it was one of rebirth, of love that transcends time and space. Alex had not only healed himself, he had healed others. The days he spent with Hunter and Thor were the days where love, loyalty, and sacrifice were seen and felt deeply. Their relationship was proof of the power of friendship, of animal love, and of living fully, not just for yourself, but for the ones around you. When the story came to an end, the image of Alex lived on in the hearts of those who knew him. He wasn't here anymore, but what he left behind would forever live in the hearts of those who loved him, especially in the minds of Hunter and Thor. In his last moments, as the pain in his chest grew, Alex felt an extraordinary calm. There was nothing left to fear. He had walked through a lifetime full of struggles, but now, even as he had to leave this world, his heart remained full of faith. The peace wrapped around him like a soft blanket, as if he had fulfilled his purpose. Though he wouldn't be there to see them grow or take on new missions, he knew that Hunter and Thor would always carry the lessons he had taught them, lessons of loyalty, unconditional love, and sacrifice. Their lives would be fuller, and they would continue to help others, doing what he couldn't in his final days. In that quiet darkness, Alex knew he wasn't alone. He had had loyal friends like Hunter and Thor, who had stayed by his side through the darkest, most painful times. Even though these dogs wouldn't be with him any longer, they would live better lives. And that was the most important thing to Alex. He had given them the chance to live fully, to do the things that only brave dogs like them could do. Though he was gone, The values he passed down to them would live on forever. Alex felt proud. He wasn't afraid anymore, not of what was to come. His life was full of memories of love, persistence, and loyalty. And even though he no longer existed in body, he lived on in the hearts of those who loved him, especially in the hearts of Hunter and Thor. They weren't just his companions. They were a vital part of his healing journey. When Alex passed, Hunter and Thor continued their lives, but the legacy Alex left behind would forever be present in every step they took. These dogs, though no longer by his side, would always carry the love, loyalty, and strength Alex had given them. The story of Alex, Hunter, and Thor isn't just a journey of friendship and loyalty. It's a lesson in sacrifice and unconditional love. Even in the face of hardship and pain, Alex showed us that love can heal even the deepest wounds. His life, though it came to an end, left behind a powerful message about devotion, loyalty, and the belief in true friendship. This story serves as a reminder that even in our most difficult moments, peace can be found in loving and cherishing the relationships we have. Things may not last forever, but love and loyalty will remain in our hearts, carrying us through. Where do you fit into this story? Have you ever experienced moments of deep emotion and sacrifice like this?